What random life coincidence have you experienced that left you kind of speechless? Don't know why, but my parents thought for sure I was going to be a girl. So much so they did pick a boy name. Surprise, not a girl. 29 years later, I meet a lovely college girl with the same name first and middle name as I was supposed to have. She thought it was a cute pickup line. I don't think she really believed me until she met my mom. Yes, we've been married for 23 years. One time within about a week and a half I witnessed a car explode, a house fire, a fatal car accident, and a drive-by shooting. I started believing I was the problem. Took my future wife on date very early in our relationship. Went through ATM to get money from her bank I was driving. When she told me her 4-digit PIN, it was the same as mine. For me it was the alarm code to my house growing up. For her it was the last 4 digits of her social security number. I saw it as a sign. Mind blown. One time I accidentally wore the exact same outfit as a mannequin at the mall. A kid asked their mom if I was alive, and I've never questioned my humanity more. I once ran into an old friend while traveling abroad in a tiny, random village we had both never been to before. Neither of us had any idea the other would be there. It was like the universe just decided to make it happen. When my dad passed away, I was also planning my wedding. We were going to dance to Tiny Dancer. He passed away and I got in the car to go to my sister's house. It was raining. I remember crying and asking, where did he go? And is he okay? Tiny Dancer comes on the radio and the rain stops. The sun pops out during the song. I would like to think it's not a coincidence. I lost my best friend that day and I liked the idea that it was him. I met someone on a plane who ended up being my future boss 5 years later in a completely diff city. In grade 7, our class was learning about the laws and how the courts work. We went to the courthouse one day to see it up close and in person. As I'm sitting there, I realize my dad is sitting on the other side of the room. I instantly start sweating because I have a hunch he's not there to learn about the court system. Sure enough, his name gets called out and he comes up for a friggin' DUI charge. Ends up losing his license for a year. Most embarrassed I've ever been in my life. As a teenager, I worked at a coffee shop with a lot of townies. Because I worked there for years, I became close to the regulars, including an older gentleman and his son who was around my age. The father got me interested in joining the Historical Society, which I did was a board member for over a decade. The father ended up needing a lung transplant, which he received. Sadly, he died from lung cancer shortly after receiving the transplant. At this point, I knew the man and his son for over a decade. I go to his funeral, wait in line for over an hour, get to his coffin and his widow. I tell her how sorry I am for her loss and how great of a person her husband was. She then asks me if I am my first and last name. I said yes. She then says my name from High Street, which is the street I grew up on. I said yes again, super confused. She then said, "Sweetie, I was your kindergarten teacher." My jaw dropped. I couldn't believe it. I hadn't seen her since kindergarten and had no idea that she was married to the man who had just died. I was neglected as a child and she took such good care of me. We smiled, laughed, and cried. Talk about a bittersweet moment. I will never forget it. College class. Prof reads roll, asks us to raise our hands. 2 of us did, so she used our middle initial. We both did again, so she said, "What's your middle name?" We were both the same 3 names. Now she's showing up under my background check because it shows I am a pharmacist. I work healthcare, but not pharmacy. My husband and I are from the US and traveled to Ireland in 2015. We ended up deciding last minute to tour a brand new distillery in Dingle. Got to chatting with some other people waiting for the tour and found out that not only did they live in our same town, they'd bought the house that we'd been under contract on, but backed out of 3 years earlier. 3 days after my grandpa passed away, I was out shopping for picture frames for his wake. I reached up to the highest shelf and accidentally knocked over a picture frame. The glass shattered everywhere in the aisle. I went up to 3 employees before I found someone who could help me clean up the broken glass. I even offered to buy a broom so I could sweep it myself. When the employee picked up the frame, I finally realized that it had some writing scrawled around the frame. It said, "My favorite people call me Grandpa." Took my breath away a little bit. Coming out of the grocery store one day to my blue Civic, I just had one small bag and hit unlock on my fob, opened the driver's side door and got in. When I tell you something immediately felt off, like the seat just felt weird, the mirror wasn't right, and then I looked around and none of my stuff was in the car. I then looked at the poor older woman staring at me next to her shopping cart, turned my head to the right and realized what happened. We had both parked our blue Civics next to each other, both hit unlock on our respective key fobs, and I had just, on autopilot I guess, hopped into the nearest blue Civic. My car was next to hers, and when I got out and apologized profusely, she laughed it off and we went on our merry way. Very insignificant one, but once I sneezed at the same time as Dwight on The Office and Angela said bless you. I thanked her before it registered what happened. I have one from less than 24 hours ago. A few days ago, I started a rewatch of a show I loved from the early 2000s. So I'm bopping along yesterday, one season down, show on in the background while I work. I'm filling orders for my business and I realize, as I'm checking the invoice, that the one I'm boxing up has same name as one of the stars of the show I'm watching. Right now, it's not exactly the most common name, so I decide to check out their IG to see if they have any current projects, just mild curiosity, and yep, they are definitely into the hobby that I sell supplies for. It's a silly coincidence, but I'm still giddy about it. I have two. 1. I went to university on the other side of my state, in a dorm that had two wings joined by an elevator bank. A friend on the other wing asked if her friend coming to visit could stay with me because she had classes. Sure. Have her knock on my door. A while later, the knock. I opened the door and said, you look just like my cousin's second cousin. I am your cousin, idiot. 2. I had a roommate for a while in California. Several years later, I was solo touring through Germany. Nothing really planned. As I was walking around Berlin, I heard my name called. That's right. It was him. I was waiting for a flight at the airport when I noticed a guy wearing a t-shirt from my favorite local bar. I went up to him and we started chatting about it. Turns out we both lived in the same neighborhood and had even attended the same events but had never crossed paths before. I was sitting in the smoking lounge at the airport in Manila, Philippines when in walked a guy I knew from serving together in the US Navy 10 years prior. The last time I had seen him was halfway around the world in California. Not my story, but a family friend. His full name is incredibly common, a la John Smith, and one day he was driving down the street, speeding a bit, and got pulled over. No big deal. He gave the cop his info, and the cop goes back to his patrol car to check it. All of a sudden the cop bursts open his door, and shields himself behind it while pointing his gun at John, and yells at him to put his hands up. He eventually tells him he's wanted for armed robbery. John is extremely confused but complies. Long story short, it turns out that the actual robber, another John Smith, was born in the same city, in the same hospital, on the same day, around the same time, with the same full name. They were both given the same social security number. It took years for John to unravel the mess, but he said it explained a lot of weird unexplained things, mostly financial, that had happened throughout his life. One time my brother, who lives in a completely different part of the country, was on a Monday morning flight to Nashville for work. I was also flying to Nashville for meetings that day and was sitting 2 rows behind him. On the same flight. It was uncanny.